It's the Believe in Texans podcast presented by FanDuel and Cecil. I have to be careful. The Texans have their initial roster. It's not their final roster.
Initial.
As Nick Al-Shaair reminded us today that after the final cuts, we've got waivers. By the time people are listening or watching to this, the roster may have changed. But this is the 53-man roster for a brief moment in time. And I got to give you credit. There's 7 wide receivers. They kept Justin Watson. I told you no, Cecil. You're not as plugged in as me. I'm a sports radio host, you see, and I don't think there will be 7. They kept Justin Watson. There's some other position groups where they kept fewer, but you called it. You said you thought Justin Watson would be on the team.
I did. I just assumed from the special team standpoint, and then honestly looking at his body stature, right? So if you don't keep him, that's your guys that if somebody goes down on the outside, you have nobody really to fill that in, right? So I think that's just a wise decision, but also it takes away from other positions as we'll get to.
Yeah, well, okay. And that is Sean and I talked about it this morning on the radio show. We talked about the roster for a few minutes and we hadn't mentioned the fact that there's only 2 tight ends and our listeners were irate because I think that's the biggest touch point is Nick Caley comes in. He's a former tight ends coach. Hey, we're going to be running heavy personnel. We're going to have a fullback. We'll run 3 tight end sets. And now they've only got 2 tight ends on the roster and they cut their fullback and Jakob Johnson. So the tight end position only having 2 players. And that's kind of intertwined with, they kept British Brooks as who's played running back way more than actual fullback in the preseason. But, they got rid of Jakob Johnson. As far as the tight ends go, it probably works out well that we're talking about Justin Watson because, if they do want to use 3 tight ends on the field or at times just maybe have Cade Stover and a bigger body receiver in there, Justin Watson can do that. They could use 6 offensive linemen. And then I also think that there's a real good chance Irv Smith was put on the IR. I think if Irv Smith was healthy, he'd probably be on this team. So I think they're probably out there looking for a tight end right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they bring somebody in. If you look at, I don't know how much 13 personnel, meaning 3 tight ends, they'll be in. Right. I'm not sure if that.
It's not a staple or anything anybody ever uses. Yeah,
could be a goal line situation, but if you can do that, then great. You can put Watson in. He's a bigger guy that can do a decent job at blocking. So yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I think, like you said, it's the initial roster. So there always will be different little moves that happen in different positions. I was surprised that they didn't keep a fullback-ish, right? British is a strong guy, but he's not like a fullback type. Maybe Stover is the guy. Stover really impressed with his blocking. I mean, you text a little bit during the game, like, hey, this kid can get after it a little bit. So that was fun to see. But I wouldn't be surprised if they add somebody else in that room. You mentioned Irv Smith. I wonder if there's somebody on another team out there that they want to bring in and get some reps.
Right. And the tight end playing fullback, it always agitates me just because, they're not like Lorenzo Neal, who we had on last week. They're not born, dyed in the wool fullbacks. But guys like Cade Stover they project to be in that way. I think with British Brooks, part of it is just, man, on special teams, when he makes a play, about it. He's knocking guys into the turf. And I think they probably look at him as, hey, he doesn't have a lot of experience playing fullback, but we can work him into that. And I think the upside compared to Jakob Johnson, who I was excited about the thought of having a fullback. I wasn't super enthusiastic about his actual blocking in the preseason games. I didn't see things that made me think, oh yeah, this guy's just going to be destroying people. So I'm not overly worried about that. I think Nick Caley's been pretty adamant, or at least consistent, saying every time he talks that this scheme is going to be about what can the players on the field do. And I'm not going to try to be locked into one specific thing. Somebody this morning said, hey, he comes from New England. You'd think that he'd want to have as many tight ends as possible. I think that the thing about New England, the error in thinking that there's one specific way they ever did it in New England with Belichick there is that the only thing that was consistent was that they changed it all the time. Yep. And if you've got Gronkowski and you've got Aaron Hernandez, by all means, being 12 personnel all the time. But if you can't keep a guy on your roster that you don't think is one of the best 53 players just because he's a tight end or just because he's a fullback. And I think that's where they are right now. And the other part too is Caley's background is New England, but then also the Rams. That's what Sean McVay has done. Sean McVay, when he first got to LA, he was coming out of that Shanahan-Kubiak scheme, and he's thinking he was going to be heavy tight ends, but he looks at his roster, and I've got all these wide receivers. I'm going to be a 3 wide receiver team, and then he transitioned out of that over time as well.
And I think that's a sign of a good coach, a good GM, figuring out, okay, what do we have? What's our depth at? Where's our best position at, on offense or defense? Okay, let's mold our team or offense to do what we're good at, right? Don't force something that's not there. And you mentioned New England, and it makes me interested on how they're used Woody Mark. Because every time I hear New England, I think of James White.
Yeah, exactly.
Like how they use James White in the backfield, motion them out. They put him split out wide. They had him in the slot. They hand the ball off to him. And I can see Woody Marks possibly being in that scenario at times. But I'm interested to see how they use him. But yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if we get to the running backs, British Brooks being kept, I guess, shouldn't have been a surprise. They kept him last year, and then he had some injury issues, and then he saw time. But it's not a huge. I knew they liked British Brooks. I guess in terms of the overall composition of the running backs room, there's nobody that I get super excited about without Joe Mixon being out there, and we might as well touch on Joe Mixon right now. Which, by the way, FanDuel has Matt Stafford as the favorite to have more passing yards than C.J. Stroud in the Week 1 game. He's at -140. The run game is going to be a huge part of that, obviously. And I feel like the run game is still a big unknown. If Joe Mixon were there, I might say, I maybe C.J. Stroud doesn't have that many yards receiving because they're going to lean into the run game. I'm now more kind of leaning towards, yeah, I like what Nick Chubb has shown, but I watched a bunch of Joe Mixon highlights last night, and it looked different than the way Nick Chubb has looked during camp. It looks different than the way Dameon Pierce has looked for the last couple of years. Woody Marks is a big X factor there. And then Joe Mixon, okay, I use you as somebody to talk some sense into me sometimes when I'm either being overly optimistic or pessimistic. I'm getting increasingly pessimistic about Joe Mixon coming back after his 4 weeks on the non-football injury list.
You know what? First of all, it's listed as a non-football injury. So I don't know how he got hurt, right?
Nobody does.
We don't know much about the injury.
I got a bunch of people in my DMs claiming they know, and I'm sorry. I just don't. I'm sorry, Joe with 17 digits after your name. I just can't trust you.
But I'm kind of with you. What makes me nervous is he's 29 years old.
Yeah.
And the closer you get to 30 as a football player, you're considered old. But a running back, you're starting to hit that ancient, right?
Right.
So like it's interesting, like how his body's going to handle coming back. And he had some ankle issues last year, or foot ankle issues last year on that tackle he had against it was a home game. I can't remember who was.
Yeah, it was early in the season on the hip drop tackle. Yeah.
The hip drop tackle, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what the injury is, where it came from, and it's the same ankle or foot or leg as the last season, and him getting closer to 30, it makes me nervous. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm already looking at Jeremiah Smith. How can we get Jeremiah Smith from Notre Dame? How can we get running back from Penn State?
No, and I think by the time that people might watch or listen to this, they might have picked somebody up. But I mean, they've already got a relatively bloated running back room, unless you're calling British Brooks a fullback, possibly a tight end at some point. I think the other thing about Joe Mixon, and we'll get to the rest of the cuts here in a little bit, was that he hasn't been out there. It's not like he's out there, watching, and the way that Christian Harris or Dameon Pierce was, he's not standing behind the offense. So usually if you feel like a guy's close to coming back or has a reasonable expectation, you'd want him out there learning the offense. But I know he's gone and gotten treatment at various places because people send all those to me as well. That's the part I think is most concerning is he's been MIA. You just don't see him out there.
So he's not in the building at all?
I don't know how much he's been in the building, but he's not out at practice. It's all a big mystery.
That's the mystery of it makes it seem like it's a lot more serious than what they're trying to give off.
Right.
That's why I'm with you. I'm not sure if he'll be back after 8 weeks. It might be a little longer, halfway through the season before he comes back. And hopefully he's back sooner than later, right? After the 4, I think the 5th week versus Baltimore.
It's Baltimore. Yeah.
Which will be awesome. He'll be fresh coming back. But I'm not too optimistic he'll be it's just too much going on and too much we don't know. It makes me nervous.
That's what I had said yesterday. I tweeted out, as a fan, I really would love to know exactly what's going on with Joe Mixon. From a sportsmanship or from a gamesmanship part of it. I don't want the Ravens knowing a single thing about it. And obviously they're going to know something by that point. And right. I said the Ravens just because that's when he'd be first eligible to return. A lot of people pointed out to me that it might not be in week 5, if at all. But I got some pushback from that because people always say, well, look, is that going to help you win the game? Is that going to be the thing that lets you win the game? I feel like for gamesmanship, first off, it's never one thing that makes you win a football game. Even if the quarterback throws a brilliant 70-yard pass at the game, there were 1,000 other things that led up to that. So I always look at gamesmanship and withholding information as just one of those many, many, many things that add up. And if the Ravens don't have a great feel for what Joe Mixon is going to do in week 5, or if it's week 8 or week 9, I'm cool. I hate it as a sports radio host, but I get it from the way that, and Caserio today in his press conference also said, we don't give any more information than we have to protect the player. So the players, if players don't want it out there, we don't put it out there.
No, and that's perfectly fine with me. Like, yeah. I'm with all the gamesmanship. Don't give them, especially at this level, this is their profession. This is all they do. They study, pick you apart. So don't give them any more information than you have to, period. Yeah. So if Joe Mixon wants to come back week 5, eventually he'll be out, right? But just keep it to yourself as long as you can.
The defensive backfield right now is another thing a lot of people are concerned about. And we've talked about this already, is just the depth. The depth in the defensive backfield is not nearly, you don't feel nearly as good about it as you feel about the actual starters. The starters might be the best group in the league or one of the best groups in the league. But if you look at right now, the backup cornerbacks are Jalen Smith and Tremon Smith. And Jalen has played outside all of training camp. I haven't seen him play snap at slot. So, and, he's a rookie. And you start feeling, man, if one of those guys, if Tremon Smith has to fill in for Kamari Lassiter or something, then you start to get real dicey if Jalen Petrie is injured, or if maybe you wanted somebody else on Devontae Adams and Jalen Petrie in a specific situation. That's another one that I think they're probably going to go from outside the building at some point. Oh, and then also at the press conference today, Nick Caserio was talking about the different players and the guys' versatility. And Miles Bryant is one of the guys who was cut. He can play safety, he can play cornerback. But Nick said, Miles Bryant is good at that, but he's not on the roster right now. And like, he caught himself, but I don't know if they're just planning on, hopefully he clears. Well, he doesn't have to clear waivers. That hopefully they're doing something with the roster right now, and they plan to sign him back. Sometimes they mess with. There's a whole sometimes a guy's salary is guaranteed if they're active in week 1. So sometimes they wait to sign some of those veteran players after week 1. So we might see Miles Bryant back, but I think there's definitely somebody who's not on the roster right now in the defensive backfield who will be before week 1.
I think you have to. Even if you bring Bryant back, you have to bring somebody else in. I'm just not sold. Tremon Smith is journeyman. Respect to him, but he's just not somebody I'm comfortable with going in that corner if Derek or Kamari is out. Same thing with Jalen. Jalen showed some flashes. Had an interception last week or the week before in preseason. Yeah, but he's still a rookie, and he still needs some time to groom and get in that room and learn from those guys. Now, I do trust Nick in bringing in the right people. I think he's done that in the past. But you have to bring in somebody besides Bryant to really elevate that cornerback in particular. Safety, I think you're deep enough. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in a corner in the safety maybe. I think safety, you're deep enough, but cornerback especially, you got to bring somebody in.
Graham Mertz, third-string quarterback. They kept Graham Mertz. Okay. I guess this would have been a big surprise after the first preseason game and his 3 interceptions, even though I know they probably weren't all his fault. But he threw 3 interceptions in the first preseason game. I don't know. I feel like after that third preseason game, I was trying to look at it as objectively as possible. But you go through that game, Cecil, and he was 14 for 16. And the 2 incompletions, I think, might have just been miscommunications or just the receivers not, because he had that fade in the end zone, and Quintez Cephas just, he was tapping his chest on the way back to the huddle. I think, and the ball dropped right in bounds, where if he had looked for it earlier or broken off earlier, he would have gotten it. And then there was another play down the left sideline where likewise it dropped. It wasn't like CJ's pass to Nico a couple weeks ago where, it just dropped way out of bounds. So regardless, he was 14 to 16, and he looked smooth running the ball. I'm allowing myself to get excited about Graham Mertz, and that if Davis Mills decides to test free agency or something, then there you go.
You know what? I think Graham is a guy they like a lot, because I'm thinking, why would they keep 3? Like, why would they keep 3? Cut him, put him on practice squad. But he played so well in the last 2 preseason games, especially the last one. I think he'd have been picked up. Yeah. I think people were high on him coming out. I think, honestly, if he wouldn't have injured his knee in the position at Florida and then dealing with DJ Lagway, who was exceptional talent, he probably would have went a little bit higher in the draft. Yeah. So I think they're thinking, hey, if we can get this guy at number 3, just keep him there, learn from Davis, learn from CJ. And like you said, if Davis does end up going somewhere else, getting a little payday, getting an opportunity somewhere, then you got Graham that's ready to rock and roll at a solid number 2. So he definitely impressed all of us. But it's interesting. I'm like, dang, why you keep 3? But it makes sense. They must really, really like him and think they may lose him if they cut him.
Yeah, and Davis is a free agent at the end of this year. And it's just, I mean, I know people are going to roll their eyes at how Davis might command a certain amount of money or what. If there's a couple teams out there that want an experienced backup quarterback, he's going to make more money than the Texans really should be spending for a backup quarterback. So, yeah, this is almost I don't want to say a long-term move, but at least a 2-year time horizon move. Another mild surprise for me was that they kept both Jake Hansen and Jamal Hill at linebacker. Yeah.
You mentioned the other day that they would keep one or the other. So I was thinking about you when I saw it last night. I'm like, oh, they kept both. But who did they end up getting rid of?
Let's see. The cuts for the total. Oh, Nick Niemann. That was the mild surprise. Nick Niemann was one of the guys that I thought, man, they signed him specifically to be a special teamer. So, because he hasn't played nearly that much linebacker at all in his career. But when you give a guy a good chunk of guaranteed money, I want to say it was $4 million guaranteed or so. That's like a Frank Ross signing. But you look, there's so many guys that are backups on the team right now that are really good special teamers that you just can't keep all those guys. And I think Jamal Hill, the upside of Jamal Hill as a linebacker and as a special teamer is probably what they were looking for there. I mean, Frank Ross would love to keep Nick Niemann, but they also cut Jackson Woodard and KC Osai. Those are 2 undrafted rookie free agents, and I think they'll definitely be on the special teams or on the practice squad. Yeah, because Nick, when Sean and I asked Nick Caserio to name a couple of undrafted free agents he likes, Nick immediately said those 2 guys. Said they're together all the time. They're always, you see them around the facility working all the time. Other big news that isn't a direct cut or anything, but it was involved in the deadline and how the composition of this offensive line was that Adam Schefter reported Cam Robinson is being shopped for a trade. And if you think about the timeline of this, they signed Cam Robinson in March as a free agent, 1-year deal, without knowing whether they were going to get an offensive tackle in the draft. And if they did get an offensive tackle in the draft, would they feel good about him? So I think as soon as Ariante Ursary plays the way he did in camp and they're willing to start him, all of a sudden Cam Robinson, A, is making a good chunk of money, but then also B, probably came to Houston expecting it to be a prove it deal where he was going to get to play for a year and then get a bigger contract elsewhere. The Texans might extend him. So I think that this is a little bit twofold. It's that the Texans could use the draft capital if they get a good offer for him, but then also in doing right by Cam Robinson and Cam Robinson probably wanting to get the play time. I think both parties are probably involved in this. Like I don't think it was a surprise to Cam Robinson that the Texans are shopping him in a trade. That was probably one of those things they had a conversation about.
And this makes me excited because I think that tells us that Ursary is ready to go. And that Ursary has shown enough that, hey, he can be the guy at one of the tackle spots. So no issue with him shopping Cam. Nick Caserio does a good job getting some conversation with the 6th, 7th round, whatever the case may be. Maybe you can get more for Cam. I'm not sure. Maybe you can get more.
If somebody's desperate, they traded Austin Deculus to the Chargers, who have a tackle, are in need of a tackle. The Falcons, I don't know if they've made any moves yet, but they could use an offensive tackle. And that's where I think it's, it gets leaked, I'm guessing intentionally, that they're shopping Cam Robinson yesterday, because that's a good time to do it when teams are shuffling everything around. But you've got until the trade deadline, and I think they can afford to sit and have Cam Robinson as a backup. I feel better about him than Blake Fisher, but that also if somebody comes up, if somebody's really desperate, and comes up with like a third rounder or something, then you can do that.
That'd be good.
The other one too is I can't remember if this was this happened since the last time you and I talked. Jimmy Ward put on the commissioner's exempt list. So basically they allow the legal process to play out, and he gets it's the compromise the league, for the listeners who don't know. It's basically how the league doesn't punish a guy before anybody's proven anything, but they also don't want to be in a position where somebody who may have done something illegal or wrong is out there playing football. So they pay him, but he's not allowed around the facility or anything. You just kind of put the pause button on him. From a strictly football standpoint, you can't expect Jimmy Ward to play an entire season anymore. He's had injuries every single year. He's well into his 30s. Yes. So just strictly football, if we leave the whole legal side of it out of it, let's say hypothetically he came back and he was cleared to play, I'm okay with him getting some rest and then, not being dependent on for an entire season. And maybe it's something that bolsters your roster late in the year.
Hey, I'm with that because he's a quality depth piece, even at his age.
Yeah.
The only issue, he played well when he was healthy. It's just he kept getting banged up at different times.
Well, that was when Petrie went down, he came in and played the star and was awesome. And I think that was in the Titans game, but then he got injured again. So yeah. And obviously it's an ugly legal situation. So I always feel weird talking about the football side of things because this is one of those real world deals. Matt Stafford feels good. Apparently, he's been practicing.
He ain't been hit yet.
I know.
Will ain't come in yet. Daniil ain't come hit him yet.
And we were saying this morning he's had an epidural, so he's ready to either play football or give birth to a baby. And yes. But he's had to do it. He's gonna have to try to give birth while Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson are bearing down on him. There's no amount of Lamaze breathing or anything is gonna help you in that situation. You know how backs are. He'll feel 100% great until all of a sudden he's 100% incapable of even walking off the field.
Yep.
And he's 37 years old. I don't know. If I were a Rams fan, I wouldn't feel optimistic that he's going to make it through the season. But if I'm a Texans fan, I don't know if and when it's going to be that back seizes him up. So if he's fine and healthy, I think he might go out there and look like the vintage version of himself. But it's a big test versus full contact football for the first time in week 1.
It's going to be a huge test. He has to continue to learn to trust his body. Even at 37, the older you get, the more you're conscious of, okay, I got to make sure I'm not doing too much, doing the right things. And I'm telling you, and you know this, Sean, I keep calling you Sean.
That's all right. I do the same thing. I called Sean Mike, my old co-host name, for like 3 years.
You notice that a back is a thing.
Yeah.
That's something that's a weird spot, especially the older you get. And then I'm worried, and I'm not worried, but for him, if he gets hit in the back coming from the blind side, or if he just lands wrong, right? If Aziz comes in there, you know what I mean? It's just
he got to deal with Aziz. Oh, that's what we got to flood his social media mentions with a video of Aziz hitting the Goldilocks there, Trevor Lawrence. Last year.
Goldilocks.
Yeah, Prince Charming or Chloe Savini. So the Texans remain 2.5-point underdogs on FanDuel. So I think from the odds makers perspective, I think the thing that might be, I think if I'm in Vegas, I'm not feeling like the Texans did anything to improve their offensive line based on the paper version of it. I think that based on what I've seen, it's going to be an improved offensive line. I don't know what their ceiling is, but I do think that from a gambling perspective or from an odds making perspective, and I've got a bias, obviously, but I think that's something that people outside of Houston might be overlooking. I can watch camp and see that, okay, these guys are a lot better off on the offensive line, even without any name brand players per se, than they were last year during training camp. So I feel good about that part of it. And I feel good. I feel really good about CJ and the passing game, as long as the pass protection holds up.
No, I'm with you. And I'm going back to the very first point you made about the game really quick. It wasn't the point. It was I think FanDuel was it Matthew Stafford?
Matt Stafford is favored over Stroud to have more passing yards.
I wouldn't see that. I think it's going to be a lot of quick game, especially to supplement that run game. I think they're going to take advantage of Joe Mixon being out and using those slots, using those outside receivers, the tight ends, and getting rid of the ball quickly. So I think his yards would be probably more than Stafford coming off an injury.
Yeah, there might be a lot of passing to simulate the run game and the short game and the screens and Woody Marks and everything else like that. So thanks to FanDuel for sponsoring the Believe in Texans podcast. Cecil, I look forward to, let's see, we'll figure out what our Labor Day schedule is sometime in the next few days. But sometime next week, you guys will get a good couple doses of Cecil and I. Everybody have a great one.
Take care.